What if Earth once knew something and forgot? Beneath the silence of midnight, beneath the hush of waves and drifting stars, there is a question that echoes not in sound, but in stillness. What if the moon is not a witness, but a scar? Wherever you are tonight, I'm glad you're here. Let time slow, let memory soften, and let the earth begin again. In the language it speaks best, silence. Long before the earth had oceans, before the sky learned how to blue itself, there was a shadow in the solar wind. It did not roar, it did not strike, it simply came near. A body, a planet, a dream not yet broken. They call it Theia now, but names were not yet real. It moved like longing through the early chaos, drawn toward Earth, not by fury, but by the gravity of becoming, two bodies in a dance that could never end softly, two silences colliding, and the sky, if there was a sky, never forgot. This was not an explosion, it was an exhale, a slow, aching inhale held too long, finally released into heat and dust and vapor. The earth bled sky that day. Magma lifted in plumes that kissed nothing. Stone melted in prayer. And from the fire, not death. Not exactly. But the moon, it did not form whole. It gathered specks of aftermath, flesh of a planet never born, skirt of vaporous silk orbiting the wounded earth. Theia did not die in the way mortals think of death. It became other. It became forgotten. It became round again, but colder now, and lonely. Above the ruins of its own impact, it settled into orbit, not to flee, but to stay just far enough away to never return. The moon is not a child. It is a haunting. No one remembers the exact time, because time did not yet exist as a ticking thing. It was a thick, burning lake of light and elements, torn open and smeared across silence. And silence, as always, endures. The earth cooled slowly, ash falling into oceans not yet formed, crust hardening like a scar around the wound. Theia's bones drifted. Some stayed. Some became rings that never lasted. Some became the moon. And some sank into Earth's molten belly, to sleep forever, unnamed. Look at the moon now, and it glows. But it glows like a bruise, a memory swollen just beneath the surface. Its face still cratered by echoes, not just from meteors, but from the impossible fact that it should not exist. Worlds do not usually leave ghosts, but Theia did. A ghost with no atmosphere, no sound, no breath, only reflection. Light touches it and dies, and still it moves, not in rebellion, not in rage, but in something softer, like a planet bowing, not to Earth, but to what it might have been. Each orbit is a song sung backward. Each phase is a story told by a world that was almost real. Some say we owe everything to that impact. That life itself would not have happened without the moon. That Earth needed to be tilted, rocked, thrown into rhythm, that the tides could not rise without her. But what if the moon is not Earth's gift, but Theia's last breath? What if the moon remembers, not in thought, but in texture, in dust, in craters that line up like fingerprints, left on a body that once burned? There are no fossils on the moon, no water to etch time, no wind to move memory. But that doesn't mean there is no story. Some stories are carved, not written. Some are circular, like orbits, like grief. And Theia, that forgotten world, might still be spinning inside the moon, waiting to be named not in textbooks, but in sleep. The moon does not shine. It remembers. Each silver breath it casts across the ocean is not light, but longing reflected. Theia's bones, pressed into orbit, still turn their face toward Earth, the mother it never meant to wound, or perhaps the mirror it always sought to become. There are no volcanoes now, no magma seas on the moon, just dust. Dust so fine it clings to silence, carried like breath on the boots of wanderers who barely touched her. The astronauts came and went, their footprints still sleep on her skin, unmoved, untouched by time, because time on the moon does not pass. It settles. In the cold reaches of orbit, she circles, not endlessly, but patiently, as if waiting for the Earth to remember. Not the collision, but the before, for there was a before. A spiral of dust, a chorus of newborn planets, still shaping their breath. And Theia, that silent wanderer, might have been more than an accident. It might have been a twin. Earth's echo, Earth's sibling, or perhaps Earth's mirror. Some say Theia formed at the Lagrange point, a cradle of quiet between Earth and Sun, balanced perfectly, just long enough to dream. But dreams are fragile in the gravity of stars. One shift, one nudge, and balance becomes descent. So Theia drifted, and Earth did not look away. They met not like enemies, not like strangers, but like stories that can only be told together, a collision so vast it erased the sky. But what it left behind was not ruin, it was poetry, still unravelling across tides and time. No one was there to see it, no eyes, no language, no mind to name it. But the moon was born, and in that birth, a story folded itself into stone, a story without sentences, only gravity, only heat, only the breathless silence of things becoming real. That is the language of origins, and the moon speaks it still, not in sound, but in presence, a pale coin above the world, spinning slowly, showing only one face, because the other still belongs to Theia. Imagine now the early Earth, not the blue cradle of life, but a molten scar, oceans unborn, continents still dreaming beneath magma seas, and above it a sphere of fire, newly formed, still glowing from within. The moon once shone with heat. She was no silver maiden, but a red, churning ghost, a burning halo, drawn from the body of a planet that never fully was. And as she cooled, she forgot. As all things do, she forgot the sound of collision, forgot the ache of her making. But she did not forget the orbit. Orbits are the oldest kinds of memory. And the moon remembers in circles. Theia is not dead. It is simply unread. Its story is buried. In the ratios of isotopes, in the way moon rocks match Earth's, too precisely, too completely. As if they were once the same breath, scientists argue. They measure, they theorize, but the moon does not argue. She listens, she waits, not for answers, but for awe. And awe, eventually, comes, not as revelation, but as sleep, as a quiet opening in the mind, where facts become feelings, and science becomes song. The moon was born in fire, but she lives now in silence. No atmosphere, no erosion, only scars. Her craters are not wounds, they are archives, unweathered, unmoved. In every hollow lies a story that never had to be rewritten, and that is what makes her holy. Not because she is perfect, but because she is unchanged. The earth changed. The earth grew forests, seas, mines. But the moon kept still, like a page no one dared to smudge, like a lullaby half remembered, by a planet trying to fall asleep. The moon is not cold, she is cooled. There is a difference. Cold is absence, cooled is memory. Somewhere in her core, a flicker may still hum, not of heat, but of heritage. For when Theia dissolved into fire, not all of it drifted away. Some of it remained, sank deep into Earth's molten veins, or floated as vapour, before gravity gathered it again and whispered it into form, but not function. The moon has no purpose, only presence, and sometimes presence is enough. Look upward on a still night, and she looks back, not with eyes, but with endless patience. She does not twinkle like stars. She does not flicker or fall. She hangs, full of her own gravity and none of her own light, all of it borrowed, all of it reflected. She is the quietest thief, stealing nothing but radiance from a star she will never reach. And in that glow, Theia survives, not in colour, but in contour, a silhouette of what once tried to be whole. There are those who say the moon is empty, a hollow sphere, cracked and cold, but they forget that silence does not mean absence. It means stillness. It means reverence. The moon is not hollow. She is hushed. Her crust holds clues, frozen lava plains, fields of basalt darker than sleep. They call them Maria, the seas of the moon. But there is no water, only stone that once flowed, like sorrow from a wounded world. The seas on the moon do not rise. They do not tide. They remain, perfectly still, perfectly ancient, like pages of a book. No hand has dared to turn. In those craters, in those basalt fields, are echoes, not sound, but shape, pattern, direction. Theia moved in a line, but her memory circles. Even now, the moon's orbit grows, slowly, invisibly. Each year, she drifts a little farther, an inch or so, the length of a fingernail. But even distance has meaning. Even drift is a kind of devotion. She is not escaping. She is remembering how far she fell, to become close. And Earth? Earth turns to her still, pulling tides like breath through a hollow reed. The oceans rise, not from the moon's command, but from Earth's remembering of what it lost. Tides are not pulled. They are answered. The sea does not obey. It echoes. And in that rise and fall, Theia lives again, not in water, but in the motion of grief. Some myths say the moon is a goddess. Some say a mirror. Some say a wound. But perhaps she is a lullaby, one that Earth hums in its sleep, a song made of dust, forgiveness, and silence. A lullaby for a planet that once shattered itself to become what it is now, because what is Earth, if not a scar that grew gardens? What is the moon, if not a shadow that chose to stay? Theia was never meant to be forgotten. She was meant to be changed. Her story is not one of loss, but of layering. She became the moon. She became part of Earth. She became the reason the sky is not still. And somewhere, in the marrow of mountains, in the sway of kelp, in the lull of deep sleep, she waits, not to return, but to be remembered, in the way wind remembers cliffs, by how softly it slows. When it touches them, not all collisions end in shatter. Some become shape, some become song. What shattered that day did not die. It dispersed. It spiraled. It whispered its name into the molten night, and asked gravity to hold it. And gravity, the silent sculptor of everything, listened. She cupped the fragments, drew them near, spun them like thread from the bone of flame. She wove the moon. Imagine hands made of time, gathering embers, still glowing with the ache of origin. One by one, they cooled. One by one, they found each other again. Not by memory, but by pull. The moon is not a relic. She is a reunion, a gathering of what Earth could not keep, and what Theia could not hold. Each particle carries a grief so small it cannot be measured, only felt in the quiet, in the silver hush, between heartbeats. In that silence, she rose, not from ground, but from sky, a new celestial limb, born of fire and aftermath. And still, she turned her same face to Earth, locked in a gaze that never ends, not because she chose it, but because some bonds, once formed, do not loosen. This is not love. This is not curse. This is memory, spinning, without sound. The moon does not turn to face us. She is turned. Gravitational embrace, frozen over eons, made her still. On one side, we have never seen her back. But what is hidden is not gone. The far side of the moon, mottled, mountainous, richer in scars, carries the heavier memory. Not because it is darker, but because it was spared. The gaze of Earth, the hidden side bears the deeper truth. Because truth does not seek light, it seeks weight. And the far side, the unturned page, carries the story. The front could never bear. It is tempting to think of the moon as lonely, empty, adrift. But loneliness implies want. And the moon does not want. She watches. She reflects. She remains. There is a serenity in stillness. That need never be filled. Her craters are not mouths. They do not call. They only echo what the Earth has long forgotten to ask. Beneath her crust, there may be traces, fragments of Theia's iron core, swallowed whole by the earth, but pieces perhaps encased in the moon's ancient mantle. She does not reveal them. She has no need. Truth, in her language, is not declared. It is held in stone, in rhythm, in the weight of her silent orbit. She has always known that the deepest truths do not demand belief. They outlast it. 100 billion years from now, she may be gone, cast loose, lost to the dark drift of entropy. But not yet. Tonight, she circles still, low above the sleeping forests, over oceans cradled in wind, across deserts that glitter like forgotten memories. She moves not because she must, but because she always has. And in her rhythm, the earth breathes. What earth buried, the moon preserved. Where earth grew life, the moon grew still. And between them, like a thread of silver through shadow, is the story of Theia, not erased, not even lost, just folded beneath silence, pressed into dust. And dust, as always, remembers. Theia never vanished. She was never meant to. In every night sky, she waits, not as a ghost, not as a ruin, but as a memory made visible, a reminder lit not by its own fire, but by the quiet generosity of the Sunday. Because even after death, there are ways to glow. The moon is not a planet, but once she could have been. All the elements were there, all the heat, the swirl, the spark. She had the heart of a world, but it broke, and in breaking, it became something gentler, orbiting, watching, holding Earth's tides like a mother, cradling a child she would never touch again. She is not an exile. She is the altar. We call her natural satellite. We call her moon. We call her lifeless. But names cannot reach her. Names fall short. Because the moon was not made for language. She was made for lullabies, for slow drifts of thought at the edge of waking, for long silences where the soul forgets to ache. She is what starlight rests upon before it dreams. And Earth? Earth spins on, faster than it once did, because after Theia, it had to wear that collision, not as destruction, but as axis. The tilt we call seasons, the moon we call companion, the tides we mistake for certainty, all of it is aftermath. Earth dances still, because she was once broken, and from that brokenness, balance was born. There are theories, equations, simulations. They model the impact, chart the angle, map the debris. But no machine, no mind, no formula will ever trace the full truth of what became the moon, because the truth is not a shape. It is a feeling. It is the hush that falls when a child looks upward and does not ask, only wonders. And in that wonder, Theia lives. So tonight, let the moon hang heavy. Let her silver breath wash over rooftops and rivers, snowfields and skin. Let her remind the earth that it was not always whole, and that wholeness was never the point. Creation is not perfection. It is persistence. It is what remains. After the fire fades and the moon remains. Let the silence stretch. Let the orbit loop. For some things, like stories, like sorrow, like stars, do not end. They echo. And the moon, that soft echo of Theia, will circle us still, not as past, not as prophecy, but as presence, a presence that needs no name, only night. But what the planet buried, it never truly forgot. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence. The sea does not remember. It reclaims. It pulls gently at the edges of continents, as if trying to trace something, long erased. Each tide rises, not to return, but to forget, because water does not keep time. It carries it, washes over it, wears it smooth, until all moments feel the same. The moon watches. Above the salt breath of oceans, she drifts, not in command, but in communion. Her pull is not forceful. It is patient, a slow persuasion that moves not the sea, but the silence within it. Tides rise to meet her gaze, and when they fall, they leave behind only patterns, not explanations, only wet traces, of a dance that began before language. Long before the first waves touched shore, the moon learned how to pull. Before there were fish, or shells, or foam, there was only the weight of her presence, and the softness of liquid stone beginning to stir. That was the first tide. A movement not of water, but of remembering, molten seas, lifting toward a lunar ghost they had never seen, but already knew. Even now, every wave is a whisper, not of the moon's command, but of the earth's ache, for tides do not obey. They respond to a pull that is not physical alone, but emotional. Each rise is an echo, each retreat a hush. The ocean is not loyal to the moon. It is haunted by her. And the moon? She never touches. She hovers. She pulls and releases. Always just enough to stir, never enough to claim. She is the perfect absence. She gives nothing but gravity, and gravity gives nothing but movement. Yet from that emptiness, the earth sways. Mountains erode. Coral breathes. Shorelines change shape. The moon does not need to speak to be heard. Some nights, the tide is higher. Some, it hides. But there is no reason, no pattern that truly explains it. Because the sea is not ruled, it is wooed. And sometimes, what draws us cannot be measured, only felt in the bones of cliffs that used to be beaches, in the shells buried miles inland, where no water sings anymore. The moon's orbit is drifting, slowly pulling away, and with her, the tides are changing, not vanishing, but softening, like a memory told too many times. 1 billion years from now, the tides may still move, but they will not know why, and neither will the moon, for even memory fades. When pulled too far from the shore, water does not archive, it erases, and yet, within its motion, a secret lingers. The tides know the moon. They rise not in loyalty, but in longing, longing for a sky that never lands, for a face that never turns. The sea speaks in mirrors. It reflects the sky, but never holds it, just as the moon reflects the sun, but never warms. Reflections are the loneliest kind of memory. They show, but do not stay, and still, every tide that rises under her gaze is a ritual, a reaching, a return to something that was never truly grasped. There is no loyalty in the ocean, only rhythm, only repetition. But repetition is not emptiness. It is faith, softly performed. The waves curl again and again. Even though the moon never answers, they do not expect her to. They only need her to remain. When Earth was young, its seas were louder, wilder. The moon was closer then. Tides surged like storms, rising hundreds of feet, cleansing the land of its own shape. In those days, the shoreline was a wound that never closed. And yet, life emerged there. Not in the depths, not in the sky, but in the space between, where salt kissed dust and the moon pulled softly from above. That is how the earth became more than stone, not by flame, not by chance, but by being stirred. Life did not crawl from the sea. It was lifted, drawn like vapor into cloud by something unseen but unrelenting. Some say gravity is indifferent, but the moon proves otherwise. Indifference does not circle forever. Indifference does not pull gently, year after year, on the waters of a world it can never touch. Even now, on still nights, the tide arrives like a whisper, soft, reluctant, and when it leaves, it carries more than sand. It takes sound, takes scent, takes the shape of footsteps that no longer exist. And what does it leave behind? Foam, salt, a glisten that fades before the light returns. Memory. In its purest form, there are moments when the sea falls silent, not calm, silent, as if the pull has paused, as if even the moon must sometimes blink, and in that hush, all things become weightless. The stars seem closer, the wind forgets its name, the world feels held, not by hands, but by a lull, a breath between the tide's inhale and exhale, and in that breath, time forgets to move. We walk along the shore, thinking we are safe from the sea, but we are not separate. We are shoreline. Our bodies carry salt, our bones carry tides. The pull of the moon lives in our blood, in the way our hearts rise and fall, in the way we long for things we cannot name. We are not observers of the tide. We are part of its forgetting. Perhaps the moon doesn't pull at the ocean. Perhaps it simply reminds the sea what it once was: stardust, motion, heat wrapped in hush. And perhaps the sea, like all things ancient, only needs a reminder to begin again. So it lifts and falls and lifts, not in memory, but in rhythm, because some truths do not need to be remembered. They only need to be repeated. The ocean's edge is not a boundary. It is a breathing space, a threshold of not quite land, not quite sea. Here, the moon's touch is softest. Here, gravity becomes gentleness, a fingertip on the skin of the world, and the earth responds not with obedience, but with surrender, the way a shore gives way, not because it must, but because it was always meant to. There are no footprints beneath the surface, no record of the millions of moments the tides have erased. And yet, each retreat leaves behind the ghost of a gesture, a ripple, a curve, a line that says, "I was here once," but it doesn't linger. The next wave will smooth it, the wind will take it, and no one will remember, but the moon will still pull, and the tide will still rise. The sea does not hoard, it returns. It gives its stories back to silence, one by one, until even the moon forgets why it called in the first place. But this is not tragedy, it is trust. To be shaped by something that does not stay. That is the nature of tides. That is the nature of becoming. What rises must fall, not to fail, but to begin again. In the deep ocean, far from any shore, there are tides that never touch light, hidden rhythms, moving mountains of water, in slow motion prayers no one will ever see. But the moon sees, and the moon does not ask to be seen, only felt. Her work is quiet, subtle, patient, like grief. After enough years have passed, that it no longer burns, only tugs. There are places where tides bloom, where plankton rise and fall, in luminous spirals that mirror the moon's own breath. They glow, not to illuminate, but to echo. The sea, too, has stars, but they do not shine forever. Their light fades with the tide, because in the sea, even brilliance must forget itself. Once, long ago, the moon was closer, the tides louder, and earth tilted newly, still learning to dance. But time softened the pull, distance grew, and the tides became memory. The moon is still moving away, not in rejection, but in release. And one day, far in the future, when Earth's days have stretched too long and the oceans begin to evaporate, the tides will forget, not because they want to, but because all things that repeat eventually fade into rhythm alone. The sea will calm, the moon will drift, and the last tide will not be mourned, because it will not know it is the last. It will rise, as all tides do, softly, without fanfare, and then it will fall, and the shore will dry, and nothing will remember. But the dust, and dust, as always, remembers. The moon will keep circling, even without water, even without tides, because orbit does not need purpose, only presence. And even if Earth forgets what it once was, a world of waves, a child of pull, the moon will still shine. And in that light, in that final quiet shimmer, across a sea that no longer stirs, a story will end, the way all stories should, without knowing it has. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence. And silence, like tide, returns. Some skies were never born, not because they weren't imagined, but because they weren't chosen. Above the newborn Earth, there once hung a veil of vapor, smoke and stone, ash too fine to fall. Not a sky, but a waiting, a trembling shimmer of things. That could have become clouds, could have cradled light, could have whispered wind into being, but did not. When Theia collided with Earth, it was not an ending, it was a scattering, a shattering that bloomed, not in chaos, but in chance. Bits of sky that might have once rained became vapour, and that vapour danced. Around the world, above the fire, beyond the reach of breath, it spun and shimmered and became ring. A ring not of gold, but of ghosts. For a time, Earth had rings, like Saturn, like a planet, still remembering how to be a planet, not solid, not still, wrapped in the residue of a collision. That cracked the sky open like bone. Imagine that, the Earth crowned in its own undoing, debris circling not to flee, but to linger, a sky not of clouds, but of loss, ashes that didn't fall. They floated, they watched, and they waited. Some of that ash rained back down, coating Earth in quiet death. Some of it burned away, never becoming anything. But some found each other in the drift, and in that finding, they began to turn, not into ring, but into realm. From the swirl of dust, the moon began again, but not all of it. Some skies never found each other. Some fragments drifted too far. Some cooled too soon, became silent stones, wandering space, without anchor. Planets that could have been, but instead became meteors, shards of forgotten skies, and even now, they fall, one by one, into our atmosphere, burning not with vengeance, but with memory. A shooting star is not a wish. It is a reminder that the sky has scars, that even now, the bones of lost beginnings are still trying to come home, not to rebuild, but to rest. The Earth's early skies were not blue, they were red, and black, and gold, a furnace's breath, a mantle unsealed, light tangled with vapour, in a way no eye could survive. That was the atmosphere we began with, a storm that had forgotten how to end, and yet from that storm, order came. But first, there was silence, not absence, but pause, the kind that follows a scream, too large to echo. The moon, too, wore this sky once, briefly, barely, a thin whisper of gas, spun from her surface, by impact after impact, not weather, but aftermath. No clouds, no rain, only the memory of having once been molten, carried away in heat, to nowhere. Even her atmosphere fled, because not all skies can stay. Some are born only to vanish, like dreams that melt, before the mind can write them down. The skies we live under now are survivors, built from breath, from algae, from the slow exhale of stone turning soft. But before that, there were other skies, skies of dust, of oxygen too thin to hold flame, of carbon heavy as sorrow. The first skies did not cradle us. They carved us, cut earth with light and lightning, shaped the land with acids and fire, until even silence bent. And in that carving, a question lingered. What if Theia had never struck? What if those skies had held? Would earth have bloomed without its wound? Would there be tides? Would there be time? Or would the planet have remained smooth, spinning endlessly, without a face to reflect it? Without a moon, would Earth have ever learned how to change? But change requires ash. It requires endings. And the skies that never formed were not wasted. They were offered, scattered like seeds, into the orbit of becoming. The moon was not born from nothing. She was born from what refused to vanish. Ashes of almosts, fragments of skies that nearly were, now pressed into dust. That holds the memory of light. Ash does not dream. It drifts. And drifting is not aimless, it is patient. The fragments of that great collision, Theia's breath, Earth's skin torn into flight, became something more than chaos. They became possibility, because when the sky is broken, something deeper begins to see. In that brief era of orbiting ash, the Earth glowed, not with light, but with memory, a planet wearing its history. Around its waist, haloed not by grace, but by grief. The moon was still becoming then, still gathering, still unsure if it would hold. It could have failed. It could have fallen back. So many things do. but the ash was willing, willing to bind, to bend, to soften the laws of motion just enough to form a sphere of shadow and silence that would never forget what it once was. But the other ash, the pieces that didn't stay, they went elsewhere, not lost, just repurposed. They became part of meteor belts, of icy comets, of minor moons around other worlds. Some may have fallen into the Sunday, not in sacrifice, but in surrender. Light always calls. What ash cannot carry? And some of those ashes fell home, tiny meteors, thousands of years later, drifting through the night sky like sparks from a forgotten fire. We make wishes on them, as if they are hope, but they are memory, burning itself clean. On return, the moon's surface carries their marks, countless impacts, small and vast, pressed into her face, like fingerprints from the cosmos. Each crater, a name never spoken. Each hollow, a failed sky that tried to come home. And still she holds them. Still she bears the burden of what never came to be, not in protest, but in stillness, because stillness is where stars go to become dust. On Earth, the atmosphere learned to change, to thicken, to cool, to cradle water and light. But on the moon, there was no change, no second sky, no breath. She wore hers only briefly, as a dream wears colour, before morning arrives. Then, nothing, only dust. And that dust has not moved in billions of years, not because it cannot, but because it remembers the weight of vanishing. Earth's skies are layered, not just in gas, but in ghosts. Even now, high above the clouds, particles from that old ring still drift, too small to see, too ancient to name. They are not pollution, they are punctuation. They are what remains. When the sentence cannot be finished, when we breathe, we do not notice the ash, but it is there. In every lungful of air, some trace of what never became sky moves through us, not to harm, not to warn, but to remind that the air we live within is borrowed, is built, is possible, only because something else was not. The sky is a memory that forgets just slowly enough to remain beautiful, and the moon, floating beyond its reach, knows every version of it, the blue one, the golden one, the ash that never quite settled. She watched them all unfold, watched them break, watched them choose silence, because not all skies are made for seeing, some are made for letting go. There is a silence that only ash can make. It is not the silence of space, which is hollow, nor the silence of sleep, which is soft. This silence is older, heavier. It presses against the edges of things, not to crush, but to remember what nearly was. The moon wears that silence, not as clothing, but as skin. Each crater, each powdered plane, is a page in a book that was never meant to be written, but still, it exists, because stillness, when held long enough, becomes history. No winds shape the moon, no rains cleanse her surface. There is no weather to blur the past. Every mark remains, as it fell, as it landed, ash upon ash, sky upon sky. The proof of what broke, still perfectly outlined. In shadow, this is not decay, this is devotion. She has preserved the chaos. That earth buried, held it close, so that the world could forget, and still go on living. And what of the skies that earth kept? They too are made of aftermath. Our oxygen, gift of ancient breath. Our clouds, vapours rising from old oceans. Once born in boiling rock, everything we see above us came from something that first fell apart. Every blue afternoon is made of old fire that forgot how to burn, and every twilight is an echo of the colour those skies never had time to wear. It is strange to think that beauty comes not from design, but from accident, that the moon exists because a world failed to hold itself together, that the sea rises because the sky once fell, that the earth breathes, because its skin was torn open and offered to the dark. But perhaps this is how all stories begin, not with creation, but with collapse. The skies that never formed are not gone. They are just folded inward, swallowed by planets that did not yet know their shape. And maybe that is what we are too, not finished, not perfect, but layers of stories that almost happened, pressed beneath the ones that did. We carry our unformed skies, in our silence, in the ache that comes when the stars feel too close to reach, in the hush before rain, in the stillness before speech. Once, the moon had no name. It was not the moon. It was a shape, a movement, a gathering of ash, too slow to fall, and too stubborn to fade. And perhaps it is still unnamed, because names are for things that need to be owned. But the moon belongs to no one. She is the sky that stood still long enough to become solid. So when you look at her, pale against the dark, whole and broken, turning without turning, remember this: she was born from a sky that tried to become earth and failed. And in that failure, she became something else, something that would never green, never storm, never breathe, but would watch, as everything else did, would keep the silence, while the rest of the world learned how to speak. She is what remains. When skies fall, but don't disappear, she is the ash that never sank, the story that never reached a reader, but still needed to be told, not in voice, not in wind, but in the quiet glow of a presence that never left. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence, and the moon, still turning, keeps every sky that never was. Gravity does not speak. It pulls. And what it pulls, it does not claim. It does not own. It holds, gently, endlessly. Even the forgotten are not lost to gravity. They simply fall in different ways. The moon circles, always, not because it must, but because something deep beneath memory asked it to. And gravity, with no voice, answered, not with permission, but with presence. There was no decision, only drift, only a slow, soft folding of matter into motion. The moon does not orbit to remember. She orbits because she was never allowed to leave. Earth does not reach for the moon. It waits. The moon does not flee. She arcs. And in that arc, there is a love so ancient it no longer needs to be named. Not a love of hearts, a love of weight, of mass, of nearness, that never quite touches, like a hand hovering over water, always about to, but never dipping in. They are bound, not by chains, but by forgetting, the kind of forgetting that feels like instinct. The moon forgets why she circles. The earth forgets when she came, but neither forgets that they are together, because gravity is not conscious. It is continuity. It does not choose. It endures, somewhere within the earth, deep in the molten marrow, where pressure crushes memory into silence, lie pieces of Theia, iron, stone, a core that never got to beat alone. It sank, not because it was unwanted, but because it was too heavy to stay above, and now it rests. At the center of things, spinning slowly, weight without witness. The gravity of forgotten things is the gravity that shapes us most. We do not orbit the past. The past orbits us, pulled by stories we can no longer name, by faces we never saw, but still dream of. And every now and then, in the hush between tides, we feel it, that tug, not toward a place, but toward a pressure, an ache, that has no location, the gravity of what was, still shaping what is. The moon herself, she is not forgotten, but what she carries, that's harder. She is made of moments that never saw sunlight, molecules forged in fire that never had the chance. To cool slowly, she is haste, held in stillness, the result of too much, becoming too fast, and yet she endures, because gravity is not hurried, Even what is born in collision can settle. Given enough time, even fire becomes silence. The Earth's gravity pulls many things: comets, asteroids, light bent into curve. But the pull between Earth and Moon is different. It's not a snare. It's a memory, a gravity made of history, of origin, of one world becoming two, or perhaps one world being split, and learning how to stay near. Without mending, distance grows. Each year, the Moon inches farther away, a slow unravelling, not betrayal, not escape, just the natural widening that comes with time. Even gravity has its limits. Even memory softens its grip, but the bond remains, stretched, thinned, like thread, spun so fine, it's almost invisible, but not broken, never broken. Gravity does not age. It only gathers. Where time erodes memory, gravity keeps it close, not by choice, but by nature. A stone rolls downhill, not because it knows the way, but because the earth still remembers that everything falls, even silence, even light. When Theia struck Earth, what did gravity do? It didn't scream. It didn't split. It rearranged. It took the chaos, the heat, the fragments of a world that almost was, and made it orbit. That is gravity's gift. Not healing, not repair, but rhythm. It turned impact into orbit, loss into cycle, ash into pattern. The Moon is not held like a prisoner. She is held like a breath. She pulls away, a little each year, but not in anger, in inevitability. And Earth, despite its mass, lets her go. Not fully, never fully, but enough to allow her to drift, as we all do, drifting yet tethered by the invisible string of what once was shared. Every orbit is a reminder, not of presence, but of absence. The Moon is not here. She is near, and that nearness is everything. Because sometimes, to circle a thing is the only way to stay close without breaking it. There are things inside the Earth that should not be there, materials denser than they should be, elements arranged strangely, iron deep where it doesn't belong. They call it the mantle anomaly, the hidden core, the ghost of Theia, still spinning, still weighted, still silent. Not a fossil, a phantom. Proof that when something is too heavy to vanish, it sinks, and when it sinks deep enough, it shapes everything above it. We do not feel this pull, not in our bodies, but we live its results, in the tilt of seasons, in the length of days, in the quiet way time curves. We are held in orbits we did not choose, and yet we are not trapped. We are balanced by gravity, by memory, by forces older than form. The Moon slows the Earth. Did you know that? Each year, her pull drags the oceans, just slightly behind. Friction, tidal resistance, time unspooling. By fractions, our days are longer now than they once were, because the Moon, in her circling, reminds us to breathe. Not faster, slower, always slower. The Earth used to spin like fire. 6-hour days, a blur. But the Moon whispered in tides, and the blur became rotation. The spin became rhythm. Now the day turns, just long enough for memory to root, for thought to linger, for stories to be told, under a sky that has learned how to turn gently. The gravity of forgotten things is not a weight on the body. It is a weight on the soul, that ache when looking at the Moon and not knowing why. It feels like a farewell, that hush when standing alone under stars and sensing something just out of reach, something ancient, watching. That is the gravity of Theia, still circling, still pulling, still shaping the silence between moments. Gravity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not ask to be known. It works in the hush, in the long pull of things once near, in the way silence becomes shape. The Moon is still bound to Earth, not by leash, by longing, and longing, like orbit, does not end. It fades, it shifts, but it circles back. Always. We call it tidal locking, the way the moon shows only one face. But what if it is not locking? What if it is listening? What if the moon turned once, then heard Earth weep, and stopped, held that same face forever, not to guard, but to grieve, because gravity remembers. What we forget, that some faces are meant to stay, that not every turn is progress, that stillness is sometimes love. The far side of the moon, the one we never see, it is rougher, heavier, thicker, as if that part took more of Theia with it, as if the hidden side bears the greater truth. The front is calm, familiar, reflective. The back is burdened, raw, unseen, but not unloved, because the Earth's pull touches all of her, even the parts we do not witness. Sometimes, what stays unseen is what holds us most, like the heavy metals buried beneath us, like the ghost planets circling in our blood, like the feeling we can't name. When the moon is full and everything inside us wants to rise, even now, gravity moves through our skin, not just from Earth, but from the stories that shaped Earth, the ones that fell and fused and stayed. We do not float freely, not in spirit, not in thought. We are always in orbit, around something we've forgotten, something older than love, but made of the same weight. We think of gravity as a force pulling down, but the moon teaches otherwise. Gravity pulls inward, toward center, toward stillness. It gathers what would have scattered. It makes a home. Out of falling, perhaps Theia never meant to crash. Perhaps Earth never meant to keep her, but gravity did not ask. It caught the moment and cradled it, turned impact into bond. And from that bond, the moon rose, not as a monument, not as a memory, but as a weightless promise that what breaks can still belong. Even now, the Earth's core hums with things it did not make, frequencies too deep to hear, materials too dense to surface, but they are there. Theia is there, not in ghost, not in ash, but in orbit, pressed inward, until it became part of what holds us upright. What lies forgotten is what gives us form. So when we say the moon orbits Earth, it is only half true, because Earth, too, orbits the past. Each tide, each tilt, each slowing spin is a gesture toward something it cannot remember, but cannot release. A grief without shape, a gravity without end. And the moon, faithful in her drifting, does not resist. She circles, always, and always just far enough away to keep from touching the wound she was born from. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence, and silence always finds its way home. There are things that belong to the moon, that never left the Earth. Not dust, not stone, but something deeper, something buried in the structure of life itself. Because what broke the sky also built the body. The calcium in bones did not come from land. It came from stars. And, before it reached us, it passed through fire and silence, and time so ancient, it no longer remembers how to end. The same calcium that forms the curve of a rib, the weight of a tooth, the white crescent of a fingernail, was born in the same chaos that gave the moon her face. This is not poetry. It is precision. The moon and Earth share more than orbit. They share atoms, isotopes, elements forged together in the same bright wound, and those elements did not stay in space. They rained back down, embedded in the crust, folded into oceans, lifted into life. Theia is not gone. Theia was not erased. She was scattered into everything that followed. The moon took her bones, but the Earth took her breath, and we, somehow, somewhere along the long cooling, took both. When we look at the moon, we are looking at part of ourselves, not metaphor, memory, a real, physical ancestry carved in silence, because some fragments were not lost. They became the marrow of mountains, the dust in leaves, the curve of vertebrae sleeping in fossils. Beneath our feet, the moon is not separate, she is within us. In the rhythm of tides, that echo in the womb, in the way sleep deepens under lunar light, in the rituals of wolves and waves and war. She does not act upon us. She awakens what was always inside. There is a quiet alignment between the orbit of the moon and the pulse of the living, menstrual cycles, shell spirals, the hatching of coral timed to moonlight, as if the reef remembers a mother it never met. These are not coincidences, they are continuities. The body, responding to a story, older than its own shape, we carry the moon, in places no microscope can find, in instincts, in rhythms, in the stillness that falls, when moonlight floods a forest and the wind forgets how to move. That stillness is not empty. It is the pause, before remembering, the hush that lets something ancient rise. Every cell hums with a gravity it cannot name. And sometimes, when the moon is high and sleep does not come, that gravity grows loud. A tug, a shiver, a knowing without language. It does not ask to be understood, only felt, like longing, like blood. So when we sleep beneath the moon, we are not resting. We are remembering, not with mind, with matter, our bodies, listening backward through time to the story of a planet that tried to become something else, and in failing, became us. The moon does not shine. She reflects, and what she reflects is not just light, but lineage. Every silver breath across the ocean, every pale wash across sleeping hills, carries the trace of where we came from, of what we carry without knowing. This is not superstition, it is science, whispered slowly, through biology and dust. Somewhere, in the spiral of our bones, are echoes of that collision, in the twist of a helix, in the rustle of chromosomes in the dark. There is evidence, not of impact, but of inheritance. We are not simply stardust. We are lunar dust, earth dust, impact dust. That decided to walk. There are minerals in our blood that mirror the moon. Zinc, iron, magnesium, not just shared in kind, but in pattern, in ratio, a match too close to be coincidence. And though our bodies change, though skin sheds and cells die, those ratios remain, as if the moon still sings within us, holding form through change. She does not need to speak. She does not need to guide. She only needs to remain. And she does, through every generation, every migration, every lost and found language. The moon is the one word the body never forgets, not through thought, through chemistry, through time. There are creatures who never see the moon and yet know her. Mollusks who rise with her cycles. Fish who lay their eggs by lunar clock. Beetles who navigate by moonlight alone. How do they know? Not by eyes. By inheritance, the moon lives in their pattern, in the code of becoming, passed down. Since the oceans boiled, even trees, rooted in soil, respond. Sap moves with tides. Leaves open wider. Under a full moon, fungi bloom. On nights when the sky is silver. And birds, some birds sleep more deeply, beneath her quiet light. Others cannot sleep at all, because the moon stirs more than tide. She stirs rhythm. She stirs memory. If we were made of water alone, perhaps her pull would be enough. But we are also made of stillness, of bone, of salt, of ancient minerals pressed into tissue, like song into wax. And the moon, she knows salt, she knows silence, she knows the weight of minerals, crushed by time. That is why we feel her. In the chest, before the mind, there are nights, when dreams go deeper, nights when sleep feels like sinking into the ocean of the self. And there, drifting just beneath waking, she waits, not to guide, not to speak, only to be known, like a fingerprint pressed faintly into the inside of a shell, something not seen, but felt every time the tide returns. And we do return, to her, to the stillness she keeps, to the reminder that we are not separate. We are moon-made, wound-born, shaped in the moment. The sky forgot how to hold itself and scattered instead into life. There is no map to trace the moon's path through the body. No diagram, no chart, only a knowing, a weightless memory pressed into the blueprint of breath. Because what is breath, if not the soft rise and fall of ancient tides? Echoing within the chest, we do not rise and fall alone. The moon rises too, and falls, and we follow, not out of worship, but recognition. The ancients named her goddess, oracle, mother, mirror, but names are only windows into wonder. The truth is quieter and closer. She is not watching us. She is within us, not presence, but pattern, not meaning, but memory. She doesn't speak to us, because she already speaks as us. Even the dust we sweep from skin knows her. Even the tears we shed move with her gravity. Not just metaphor, but motion. Salt water is not just ocean, it is history. Each drop, a chapter in the body's long drift, from stone to song. And the moon wrote that rhythm, not with pen, with pull. In the fossil record, there is a silence between bone and becoming, a quiet stretch where life began to lift itself out of water onto land. That silence is the moon, not as force. As invitation, she pulled at the tide until something rose, not because it wanted to, but because it remembered the shape of light on open air. We were not born of starlight alone. We were coaxed by reflection, and reflection is the moon's language. She does not create light, she holds it, and in holding it, she teaches life to turn toward brightness, even when the source is hidden. That is her gift. Not glow, but guidance. Not light, but direction. Look at the moon and see your own silence reflected back. The part of you that does not speak, but still moves. The part that aches when the sky is too quiet. The part that waits, even when it doesn't know what for. That part is lunar, and it does not fade. It waxes, it wanes, it endures. One day, the moon may leave, drift too far, break orbit, and the tides will slow, and the days will change, and the earth will feel lighter, but not freer. Because what leaves takes more than motion, it takes memory. But even then, she will remain in the curve of bone, in the rise of breath, in the shape of every living thing that once turned its face to silver light. To know the moon is not to look upward, it is to feel where she still lingers, in the blood, in the bones, in the places where silence takes the shape of motion. Theia is not lost. She lives in the orbit of our sleep, in the music of the marrow, in the ache that deepens. When the moon is full and we are not, some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence, and some silences live beneath the skin. Some light never touches the ground, not because it is weak, but because it was never meant to land. It lingers, it hovers, it drifts through air and silence, brushing the world without owning it. Moonlight is like that, a presence without pressure, a glow without source. It is not a thing, it is the memory of a thing. The moon does not shine, she remembers. She catches sunlight and bends it, gentle, diffuse, as if the light itself were half asleep. It does not warm, it does not blind. It simply exists, and in existing, it softens everything it touches. There is a moment just before dawn when the moon is still high and her light covers the world like ash, like breath held too long, like the hush between words. In a story that has forgotten how to end, that light does not fall. It pauses, lays itself on rooftops, water, skin, and vanishes before the world knows it was there. What is moonlight, if not a kind of kindness? Not fierce, like the Sunday, not endless like the stars, but something quieter, something given only to those who are looking at the right moment, and even then, only barely. The moon holds no light of her own. She has no fire, no spark, and yet she glows, not by creation, but by reflection. She borrows radiance and turns it into rest, turns heat into calm, turns brilliance into whisper. This is her gift. She is not the source. She is the space where light becomes safe, where the world stops flinching and begins listening, where shadows grow long enough to feel like memory. The light of the sun burns. It carves. It consumes. It forces things to bloom or wither. But the moon, she asks for nothing. She changes nothing. She simply watches. And in that watching, we change, not by force, by reflection, by remembering what it feels like to be seen softly. There are animals that bloom under moonlight, not because they need the light, but because they trust it. Moths, owls, flowers that open only when the world is asleep. They move not in search of survival, but in rhythm with the hush, with the light. That is not theirs, but feels familiar. There is a kind of shadow that only moonlight makes. It is not hard, not sharp. It is the outline of forgetting, the soft echo of form. As it once was, even trees bend differently. In the lunar dark, their branches curve, not toward the source, but toward the memory. What makes moonlight sacred is not what it shows, but what it allows us to imagine. It does not reveal. It invites the world to become quiet enough to listen to itself, to feel where it still aches, to remember what it once lost. There are fields where light never lands, canyons too deep, caves too hidden. But the moon knows them, not with light, but with presence. She moves above them, the way memory moves through grief, gentle, unseen, but real. And even in darkness, they feel her, because moonlight is not about what is seen, it is about what is felt. When all seeing has stopped, there are places where moonlight should fall, but doesn't. Not because the moon forgot them, but because the world moved, tilted, turned away. And in that absence, there is still touch, because presence is not always light. It is rhythm. It is gravity. It is a silence that never stops circling. We call it light, but what the moon gives is something else. It is the breath of fire, remembered through distance, the echo of heat, made gentle by space. The sun blazes, the moon reflects, the sun creates, the moon cradles. She holds that impossible brightness and turns it into quiet, not shadow, but shelter. There are surfaces on the moon that never feel the Sunday. Frozen craters, dark basins, shadowed valleys that have not known warmth in billions of years, and still they remain unchanged, unmoved, because even without sunlight, they are part of the pattern. The moon does not need light to exist. She is more than her reflection. She is form. She is memory. She is the shape of what happened when a planet broke and decided not to disappear. In the deep of those lunar shadows, there is ice, ancient, untouched. Water, caught between becoming and remaining. It waits there, not asleep, not awake. A memory of oceans that never formed, of rains that never fell, of skies that never opened. On Earth, light gives life, drives growth, paints the hours in colour and command. But moonlight asks nothing. It is not fuel. It is not fire. It is invitation to pause, to wonder, to soften, to become still enough to hear what time has folded away. There is a silence that only arrives under moonlight. It is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of urgency, the kind of silence that once knew fire, but chose instead to reflect. Cities forget this. Electric suns drown the hush. Artificial day stretches too long and drowns the rhythm of silver. But somewhere, beyond the glow, there are forests still ruled by the moon. They open at dusk. They breathe in cycles. They move not with the sun, but with her, and in their breath, the old pattern survives. There are humans who still mark time by her, not by calendar, but by curve, waxing, waning, Ritual rising from rhythm, not because they believe in myth, but because the moon is older than belief, older than names, older than stories, and somehow still here, still circling, still shining, with borrowed light that never quite lands. Even poets have tried to hold her, but the moon does not belong to metaphor alone. She is not symbol. She is real, a rock, a relic, a remnant that never learned how to stop orbiting. And that reality, that quiet weight, is what gives her magic. Not the stories we tell, but the silence she keeps. Moonlight is not meant to explain. It is meant to remind that not all brightness is burning, that not all touch must land, that some of the deepest truths are found not in the center, but along the edges where light just barely reaches and chooses not to push further. The moon is not trying to illuminate. She is trying to be present, and presence without force is what makes light sacred, not what it reveals, but what it allows to remain. Some photons leave the sun and never arrive. They drift, they bend, they bounce against stone, against dust, against the curve of a world that was never meant to hold them. The moon takes them in, not to keep, but to give back differently, not with fire, but with gentleness, not with brilliance, but with hush. There is a kind of light that does not reach the ground, and yet still reaches us. It enters through the eyes, but lands somewhere deeper. It moves through windows and over rooftops, not to reveal, but to remind us that we are not alone. In the dark, that something watches, without judgment, that something reflects, without reply, that something remains, even when forgotten. The moon does not glow for us. She glows because she was made from a moment that could not be undone. And that moment still echoes. Each time light hits her surface, it touches a scar, a crater, a fragment of ancient earth, lifted into space and left to circle forever. And that scar, that silence, turns light into something sacred. Not all scars are brokenness. Some are mirrors, soft ones, silver ones. The moon is one of them. A mirror, not of image, but of memory. Not what we see, but what we feel when we stop looking. There are myths that say the moon is a doorway, a window between worlds, a place where souls rest before they return. But perhaps the truth is gentler. Perhaps the moon isn't a place at all, but a pause, a moment in orbit, a loop in time, a reminder that light does not need to land to be known. When the moon is new, she hides, but she is still there. When she is waning, she thins, but she is still full. Her shape changes, but not her silence. And that silence is part of us now, not because we understand it, but because we were shaped by its gravity. The moon never touches us, and yet we are changed by her. The way water moves, the way time turns, the way light bends into silver and lingers just long enough to become memory. That is how she touches us, not in skin, but in rhythm, not in force, but in presence. There are lights that fade when looked at, stars that vanish under stare, truths that dissolve when chased, but moonlight stays, quiet, unmoved. She does not hide. She does not demand. She simply waits for the world to soften enough to feel her. And sometimes, on the right night, when clouds are few and the wind holds its breath, she spills across a field like water with no sound. She touches branches and rooftops and faces that no longer need to know what they are looking for. And in that soft illumination, everything forgotten begins to return, not as answer, not as explanation, but as light that never touched the ground and still was real. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence. And some light is meant to remain untouched. Not everything that moves means to return. Some things drift because they must, because stopping would mean forgetting. Orbits are not loops. They are long silences that never quite become still. The moon does not circle Earth because it is trapped. She circles because she was once part of it, a piece, torn by heat and impact, thrown into sky. Too slow to escape, too heavy to forget. So she stays, at a distance that grows but never severs. There are no straight lines in space, only curves, only gravities, only the surrender of motion to memory. And what circles does so not to repeat, but to remain. The moon is not just orbiting the Earth, she is orbiting the moment of her own creation, a phantom limb, moving through night, long after the body has stopped reaching for it. This is not mourning, it is persistence, the path of a wound that has learned to move. We are told the moon is moving away, an inch each year, a slow retreat. But retreat is not abandonment. Even in distance, the path holds. Even in silence, the pull remains. The moon is not leaving. She is remembering at greater length. Some orbits stretch, some tighten, but all of them, even the broken ones, echo the shape of beginnings. No object drifts alone, not truly. Everything is always falling toward something, and falling is just another word. For devotion, the moon is not the only one. Saturn's rings, Jupiter's moons, debris around stars, circling endlessly like thoughts that never land. This is how the cosmos speaks, not in light, not in flame, but in return, in repetition, in the slow drawing of invisible lines between what was and what must continue to be. Earth, too, is in orbit, around the Sunday, around the centre of the galaxy, around its own long forgetting. Every day, every year, is a path through memory. Not linear, not final, just curved, always curved. The moon taught Earth how to move. When Theia struck, Earth tilted. That tilt gave us seasons, gave us change. And the moon, in her orbit, stabilized the spin, kept it steady, kept the world from tipping too far. She does not just circle, she balances. She holds the planet in a rhythm it could not find alone. The gift of the moon is not light, it is return. Each phase, each waxing and waning, is a reminder. The cycle is the story, not beginning, not end, only motion. That learns how to stay. The moon's orbit is not perfect. It wobbles, it shifts, but even those imperfections are part of the dance, like footsteps that hesitate, like breath that catches. They do not ruin the rhythm, they reveal it, because nothing held forever is ever still. To orbit is not to flee, it is to love from afar. It is to be pulled and still choose distance, to carry the ache of what once was whole without asking it to be whole again. That is what the moon does, and what we learn from her. The moon circles alone, but not lonely. Aloneness is not absence, it is clarity. She does not need companions or words or warmth. She is enough. In her return, the orbit is her memory, her answer, her silence in motion. And every night she rises, not to begin again, but to continue what never stopped. This is not repetition, it is reverence. The sky forgets most things. Comets come and vanish. Planets drift out of sight. Even stars burn through their voices and collapse into silence. But the moon, she endures. She loops, not around light, around gravity, around origin, around the weight of a story that never asked to be told, and yet still unfolds. In shadows and tide, some orbits stretch beyond time. They do not fade. They do not end. They only become harder to see, wider, quieter, until they are mistaken for distance. But distance is a matter of light, not connection. The moon grows farther, yes, but she does not grow apart, because orbit is not about nearness. It is about motion. That remembers. Theia still lives in this arc, not in form, but in path. The shape of what she became still circles us, still guides us. Even broken worlds leave maps. Even lost things continue to shape. If you step outside, on a night of quiet skies, you can feel it. The slight tug, that does not pull the body, but the breath, the part of you that longs, without knowing what for. That is the moon's orbit, moving through the chest. That is the gravity of what once belonged, and now only circles. To live on Earth is to be part of that curve. Even sleep follows it. Dreams drift along it. The mind falls into rhythm, set not by hours, but by orbits, by cycles older than clocks, by the returning of things that never truly left. Children are born. In rhythm with it, creatures migrate. Because of it, forests bloom, coral spawns, wolves cry out, not to the moon, but with her, because the arc she moves in lives inside all living things. Even those that never look up, we are not outside her orbit. We are within it, spinning inside what was made of impact, of separation, of flame and fracture, held in gravity's hand. And still, despite the break, it turned, it circled, it remained. The moon's orbit is not smooth. It shifts, it leans, it breathes. And each shift becomes a change in tide, in wind, in the quiet muscles of the earth. Even now, even tonight, her motion speaks, not in voice, but in shadow, not in words, but in light that vanishes, only to return. Some orbits are so long, they look like stillness, but stillness is just the part of motion that moves too slowly. To be seen, the moon moves like that, and we, in her shadow, move too. The moon has circled the earth for over 4 billion years. Not one circle the same, not one orbit perfect, but all of them true, because truth, like orbit, is not about precision, it is about return, even when broken, even when drifting. She is not the first moon, she may not be the last, but she is ours, not by ownership, by origin, by the memory of one world breaking and two surviving. Orbit is the vow to never leave completely. Sometimes orbits decay. They spiral inward, pulled too close until the body burns. Other times they expand, stretching farther until distance wins and the bond fades. But in between, there are orbits that last, held in balance between closeness and letting go. The moon lives there, in that in-between, where love doesn't touch, but never stops circling. And maybe that's what we are too, bodies in orbit, around stories we no longer tell, around faces we cannot name, around memories, folded in blood and bone and silence. Our thoughts circle old questions. Why are we here? Where did we begin? What do we carry? That was never ours to choose. And the moon, she says nothing, but she stays. And in her staying, we find the answer we didn't know we were asking. Not all motion is forward. Not all progress is straight. Some truths spin in ellipses. Some meanings recur only when the light is right. Some stories have no end because they were never trying to arrive. They were only meant to move. One day, the moon will drift too far. Tides will slow. Days will stretch. And Earth, still turning, will forget the ache of the loss that gave it rhythm. But until then, she will circle, wax and wane, hide and glow, lean closer, then further. Not to teach, not to lead, but to remain. Orbits are not cages. They are devotions. They are what happens when gravity and memory refuse to separate. And in that refusal, a world was born, a moon rose, and time learned how to curve. So if tonight the moon seems too quiet, know this: she is still moving, still circling, still holding the shape of what could not be held, because some orbits never end. They just drift so far that only silence can follow them. Some truths are not lost, They are simply folded beneath silence, and some silences still move. What if Earth once knew something and forgot? What if the moon is not a witness, but a scar, not left behind, but borne forward into the sky? This question is not new. It has drifted, unspoken, through the breath of deserts, across cold ocean floors, into the echo chambers of caves, where nothing but silence has survived. A question older than language, older than thought. It is not asked with a voice. It is asked with gravity. And gravity, as always, answers by pulling. Some say the moon was captured. Some say it was born beside Earth. But what if it was Earth? What if a second planet drew near, touched too closely, and in the moment of breaking became both wound and wonder? Theia, a name we gave to a ghost, long after it vanished. She came not as threat, but as mirror, a twin, split by motion. And when she struck, the world did not end. It scattered. From that scattering, the moon rose, not as plan, as pattern. The pattern of gravity, of heat, of memory made physical. The pattern of what remains when a world is torn and chooses not to collapse. The moon is not mistake. She is memory. She is what the earth let go, but could not lose, not entirely. And we, shaped by that balance, live in the space between separation and return, tides, bones, cycles, dreams, all moving with the moon, all carrying the residue of that first breaking. She does not glow to be seen. She reflects to remind. She moves to remember. And every orbit is a slow circling around the truth that nothing complete ever creates. Only what breaks can begin. The moon is the oldest thing we will ever see with our own eyes. Not because she is ancient, but because she carries the moment. Time learned how to flow. Before the moon, the earth spun too fast, wobbled too wildly, knew no rhythm, only rawness. But then came the silence. The ring, the gathering, the moon formed, and the earth breathed. For the first time, it turned in song, and from that song, tides, sleep, seasons, from the curve of her orbit, the curve of the human spine, from the stillness of her face, the silence we carry in the marrow, from her light, the gentle kind that doesn't burn, but invites. So what if she came from a collision? So did we, born from stars that broke themselves open, born from cells that consumed each other and called it evolution, born from silence that folded itself into breath. The moon is not the story. She is the result of a story still unfolding, a story that began not with once upon a time, but with an impact too vast to remember and too beautiful to forget. There is no sound loud enough to hold that moment. Theia arriving, Earth receiving, two worlds moving toward one another without knowing they could not remain the same. Not aggression, not intention, only motion and inevitability. There are collisions that destroy. There are collisions that erase. But some collisions scatter meaning into becoming, and this was one. From that collision came debris, molten, wild, bright as a newborn star. But without the stillness of fusion, earth wept vapor and stone. The sky, if it was a sky, folded inward, smeared with the blood of planets. But out in the emptiness, something began to collect, not by will, by gravity. Theia's bones, her breath, her quiet refusal to vanish. They drifted together, they circled, they cooled, they became face, form, moon, not whole, not earth, not Theia, something else, a world made entirely of aftermath. Even now, in the ratios of lunar rock, her story lives. Oxygen isotopes that match Earth's like breath from the same lung, iron signatures that suggest another world, once melted into ours. Chemistry that doesn't lie, but doesn't speak either, only reflects, like the moon herself. She has no voice, but she listens, and in that listening, she pulls the tides. She steadies the Earth's spin. She lengthens the day by slowing it, and time, once chaotic, finds rhythm. Theia is not gone. She is layered in the moon, in the Earth, in the sea's longing for a face that never turns. Her orbit is not ghost, it is legacy. The kind that moves without form, the kind that returns. Every night she rises, in pieces, in phases, in silver silence, that crosses the faces of sleepers and the bellies of waves. She is not the light. She is the remembering of light, and that remembering is how we dream. We build calendars by her changes. We measure time by her pull, but we do not own her. We belong to her, because she is the map of our beginning, not in shape, in motion, in the cycle that never asks to be understood, only followed. The Earth no longer remembers what it felt like before the moon, the angle of its tilt, the pace of its spin, the song of its seas, but the moon remembers. That is what orbits do. They hold what cannot be kept, not in stillness, in repetition, and so she circles, not to return to what was, but to keep it from being lost. Some stories are not told. They are traced, night after night, in pale arcs across sky that no longer burns. Somewhere in the molten shadow of that forgotten collision, time learned how to breathe, not in seconds, not in minutes, but in circles, long arcs of motion that never arrive, only continue. The moon does not turn toward Earth. She was turned, and in that stillness she holds a secret. The far side, the side we never see, is not hiding. It is holding more craters, more scars, more of Theia. Because sometimes what must remain unseen. We speak of beginnings as if they happen once, but the moon was not born in a moment. She became through falling, through gathering, through cooling. She became not by growing, but by being held. Gravity, that ancient kindness, refused to let her go, and in refusing, it gave her shape. And now she moves without question, circling, watching, not to be known, but to remind the world what it once survived, because survival is not continuation, it is transformation, and the moon is the shape of a world. That became something new, instead of nothing at all. She is not our mirror, she is our shadow, the proof that something broke and chose to orbit instead of vanish. And in us, her rhythm continues. In the water in our cells, in the calcium of our bones, in the way we sleep, in the way we yearn, her orbit lives in our blood. And when we lift our heads at night and see her face, we are not looking at something beyond us. We are looking at something within. What if the moon formed? From a forgotten planetary collision? She did, but not all of it was forgotten. Some of it was kept, not in books, not in data, but in the pull, in the motion, in the silence that follows us, even when we stop listening. Some say the moon is lifeless, but that is not the same as meaningless. She is full, not of life, but of memory, memory without word, without mind, only motion. And that motion is the oldest lullaby the earth has ever known. So let her rise, let her circle, let her shine in a light that was never hers, but became her language. She does not explain, she does not argue, she reflects. And in reflection, we are made, not once, not long ago, but every night. The story does not end, it does not close, it fades, it orbits, like the moon, like us, always moving, never leaving, becoming again what it never truly stopped being. And so, what the planet buried, it never truly forgot. Some truths are not lost. They are simply folded beneath silence, and silence, when given orbit, learns how to glow